Shall we begin?
Why would a good God allow suffering to exist? Does God really exist?
Let's begin now.
Why did God command the deaths of so many people in the Bible? Why does God remain so hidden?
Let's begin now.
Welcome to The Third Degree. I'm Sule Prince, and I'm here with Dr. Tony Casa. Dr. Casa, in our last video, we unpacked it a lot of information. We talked about Marxism, we talked about cultural Marxism, we talked about social justice. There's a term that is going around, and I hate it. It just personally, I hate when I hear it. Woke. He's woke. We're being woke. What does that mean, and how does that relate?
It's one of the words that is used in the social justice movement, and it actually seems to have its origins in the Black Lives Matter movement. And the word woke, from the word to awake, the word woke basically means a state where you realize that there's racial discrimination, you realize that you've been duped by the government, you realize that you are an oppressed marginal person. And therefore, when someone comes to that realization, they're described as woke, that they're aware, they're no longer asleep or lulled to sleep by all the lies that you've been fed by the government and so forth. And so it has to do with an awareness. You are awoke to an awareness that you are a marginalized, oppressed person.
Well, there seems to be hypocrisy in the social justice movement. They talk about the Atlantic slave trade, right? How the Europeans went over there and brought... But they never talk about the Islamic slave trade, which was 1,000 years prior.
Right, exactly. Well, this is what you never hear about. We always hear about the Europeans, the Portuguese, the Danish, the British, the Americans going into Africa and taking these slaves across the Atlantic on ship. And we're not justifying that. That was a horrible thing.
Course, definitely.
That was a human rights violation of the highest order. But we need to realize that there were also African tribes who were also taking slaves. There were African tribes who made other African slaves to themselves. So there was this tribal supremacy among them. The same thing with the Aboriginals in Canada.
Which is important. This is
very
an important point, yes.
Here in Canada, the Aboriginals also fought each other. They killed each other. They cannibalized each other. They would rape each other's wives in front of their children and so forth. And also they committed acts of genocide. So the Iroquois, for example, here in North America, the Iroquois wiped out the Hurons. They completely wiped out the Hurons. And so we always hear about the myth of the noble savage, that somehow primitive people in the land were very peaceful. That's not what was the case, neither here or South America. The Aztecs would offer up slaves. They would take slaves as well and cut out their hearts to offer up to the sun god and so forth. And the Mayans did the same thing. So the hypocrisy is that Islam came to Africa, into the eastern part of Africa, and what Islam did was Islam began to take black slaves. They castrated the males and they took the women as concubines. And they took 140 million slaves across the Arabian desert into Saudi Arabia. No one talks about this today.
We never hear about it.
You never hear it in the standard textbooks. All you hear about is the West. Now, the West acknowledged they're wrong. In fact, William Wilberforce abolished slavery in the UK, in the United Kingdom. Abraham Lincoln abolished it in the United States with the Act of Emancipation. Islam to this day still practices slavery.
But nobody talks about it.
No one talks about it. It continues in the Sudan, it continues in Mauritania, it continues in Libya. It continues today because slavery is part of the Sharia law. And no one talks about this. So the social justice warriors will never bring this up because they regard Muslims as minorities who are oppressed. The other problem here as well is not only do they regard them as oppressed, but the interesting thing is that they never talk about, for example, they'll talk about the Crusades. And how the Crusades were terrible. These Western Europeans went into the Middle East and pillaged and raped and killed all these Muslims. But What they never tell you is that the Crusades were a 400-year response to the Islamic conquests. So 632 AD, Muhammad dies. The Islamic armies begin to move across the Middle East. They go into North Africa. They even go as far as Spain and Portugal until Charles Martel moves them back out. He kicks them out. So the question is this. When the Islamic conquest took place, they took all of the Middle East, which was primarily Christian. They took all of North Africa. That's why North Africa is Muslim today. They went as far as Spain and Portugal, and some of the names of the cities there, like Cordoba and Andalusia. In Portugal, we hear about Fatima, for example, and the Algarve. These are all Arabic names. No one talks about the Islamic conquests. Yeah. No one talks about Arab colonization, for example. So when the Muslims, for example, went into India, they massacred about 50 million Hindus.
Wow.
Think about that. That's an act of genocide. Yeah. And yet no one talks about this. Arab colonization, if you notice with Muslims, when someone becomes a Muslim, what do? They take an Arabic name, they dress like Arabs, the women cover themselves, and they pray to their God in Arabic. So think about that. So Arab colonization has been going on for 1,400 years. It still goes on today.
And nobody talks
about it. No one talks about reparations. Yeah. No one says you should apologize for the colonization of Islam. They will never apologize for that. And so what you find in the West is there's this obsession with apologizing. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, if you remember, apologized to the Aboriginals. He apologized to the gays. He apologized to this group. And so when you look at this, the social justice movement is hypocritical.
Yeah. And one other thought of the hypocrisy. Let's talk about the Black Lives Matter. You sent me a statistic, if you could mention it to our viewers, on how many black babies are aborted.
Yeah, in the state of New York alone, about 40% of abortions are against little black babies. And so
where's Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, if Black Lives Matter, they only seem to matter if the police get involved. Yeah. But they don't matter when they're in the womb, which is a tragedy, travesty. And what they also don't realize is that Planned Parenthood, which was created by Margaret Sanger, who was an avowed eugenicist, Margaret Sanger actually called for the abortion of Latinos, black babies, and she even talked about that. She actually said the word must not get out that we're trying to eliminate the Negro race.
Yeah,
so she actually planned to eliminate the Negro race from the United States.
And this information is not hidden information.
No, it's documented.
And in Black Lives Matter, we haven't heard nothing from.
They have never heard of this.
So we have Justin Trudeau, blackface, brownface.
Yep.
Black Lives Matter, where are they?
Yep, nowhere to be found.
Nowhere to be
found. Now, if that was Trump, who had blackface, there'd be a second impeachment.
Even if it was Andrew Scheer, oh my gosh.
Yes, there'd be a second impeachment. Right people would be having countrywide protests and so forth. So the hypocrisy is that, for example, you will find LGBTQ for Palestinians. They will attack Israel with the BDS movement, boycott and divest and sanctions and so forth. But the irony here is that LGBTQ people would be killed in the Palestinian territories.
Definitely.
Because under Islamic law, homosexuals should be killed.
Yes.
And so the irony here is that they side with those who will kill them if they have them under Sharia law, but they attack Western Christianity that gives them their freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and so forth. So if you notice, we're living in a day and age in which there is mass confusion. Absolute mass confusion, and people are wondering what's going on. And so we also see this, of course, with the transgender movement as well.
Dr. Costa, this was really good. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you for watching this video. If you like what you see, please press the subscribe button right below. And beside that is the bell icon. If you want to receive all of our notifications of everything that we do, press that icon as well. Thank you.